Hey everyone, welcome to Deep Dive here in the field. I'm John, and in this series, we've been diving deeper into the 7 letters that are to the churches in the book of Revelation. Whether you're new to this or looking for a fresh insight, this is the place to grow in your faith and understanding. Let's get started. All right. Have you ever looked alive on the outside, right? But you have felt spiritually numb on the inside? That's exactly what Jesus says to the church in Sardis. You have a reputation for being alive, but you're dead. That's a heavy statement. But honestly, it's also a wake-up call. Today, we're going to be continuing our series through Revelation's 7 letters to the 7 churches. And this time, we're going to be stopping in Sardis. What does Jesus say to a church that looks the part, but is spiritually asleep? Let's get into this. Now, before we get into this, shameless plug. If you have not been watching the other videos, go back and watch the other videos, right? So it'll help you catch up a little bit to how we've landed to this point, specifically on in this series of videos, specifically of these letters written to the churches. Now, let me go back a little bit. I'm going to give this background a little bit as we've been doing this throughout this whole series. So this is John, right? John specifically gets revelation from God, hears from Jesus himself, and he's writing. And Jesus is like, I need you to write this down to these people, to these 7 churches, and he's writing it down, right? Now, when he's writing this down, so he's writing, and each letter communicates something different, right? And they're very powerful messages because there's a lot of nuggets we can take for ourselves in our walk now on this side of eternity, right? So the reason this matters is because specifically when we're talking about the church of Sardis, it's because and listen, actually, before I say that, right? The reality is that each of these letters is very critical to unpack each letter, to get an insight into the heart of God, to really see what pleases him, what does not please him, right? What honors him, what's not honoring to him. So that's important for us to know. Like, if I love someone, I want to know what they care about, what they don't care about, what they like, what they don't like, what pleases them, what makes them upset, what makes them happy. Like, I should want to know that information. So these letters are powerful because it gives us a greater insight into what matters to God, right? And if it matters to God, it should matter to us. So specifically to the letter to the church of Sardis, the reason it matters is because it's possible, according to what we're reading here, and we're going to read it in a minute, it's possible to look alive on the outside, attend church, say the right things, while being completely asleep on the inside. So Sardis reminds us that spiritual reputation means absolutely nothing. It's our hearts. If our hearts aren't surrendered, like, Jesus isn't calling us to perform. He's calling us to wake up and return to a real relationship with him. This matters because your soul wasn't made to sleep. It was made to burn for God, right? Like, that's important for us to know. So just to give you some context a little bit here, when we look at the letters, and this is the part that I was going to say earlier, which I got completely off track and didn't say it, so I'm going to say it now. Each of these letters follows a similar format with some slight exceptions, right? But this format that we see in each of the letters is Jesus introduces himself by giving himself what's that called? By expressing himself in a certain way and identifying himself in a certain way. And we'll know that I'll show you that example in a minute. So he identifies himself in a specific way. Then he gives a commendation of some sort. So he gives a commendation, and then he gives some sort of rebuke, right? So it generally follows that format. He identifies himself a certain way, there's some sort of commendation, there's some sort of rebuke, and there's usually some sort of call to action in that's embedded in that. So that's again generally the format. Not true for all the letters, but that's generally the format, right? So a little bit about Sardis. So Sardis is this wealthy, influential city in Asia Minor. So it's famous for its past glory. But what happened is that there's this decline during John's time. So the church really was reflective of the city. It was resting on its reputation. It wasn't resting on reality. So from a biblical lens, what we will read Revelation chapter 3 verses 1 through 6, and then we'll sort of unpack it, right? It says, to the angel of the church in Sardis writes, these are the words of him who holds the seven spirits of God and the seven stars. Again, that he identifies himself in a certain way. So each of the letters, so if you look back at the other videos, actually, even if you just go back to Revelation chapter 2, you'll notice that he starts off by identifying himself in a different way each time, right? These are the words of him who holds the seven spirits of God and the seven stars. He says, I know your deeds. You have a reputation of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. For I have found your deeds unfinished in the sight of God. Remember, therefore, what you have received and heard. Hold it fast and repent. But if you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what time I will come to you. Yet, you have few people in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me, dressed in white, for they are worthy. The one who is victorious, like them, be dressed in white. I will never blot out the name of that person from the book of life, but will acknowledge that name before my Father and his angels. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now, Revelation follows a pattern. We got a commendation, right? Some sort of, here's a good job, right? A correction, a warning, and then we see a promise here. Sardis breaks that pattern. There is no commendation. There's no commendation at first. Jesus introduces himself as the one who holds, the seven spirits of God and the seven stars. A picture of his, and what we see is a picture of his full authority and full spiritual oversight. Like that's what we're noticing here. When we talk about he holds the seven spirits, he's talking about full authority. That's how he's identifying himself to this church. So when we go here, let's look first, right? He actually starts, and again, I said the general pattern what we notice, but again, there's some variation in each of the letters, right? So what he starts with actually in Revelation, in verse 1, let's go to verse 1. He says, these are the words of him. Yes. I know your deeds. You have a reputation of being alive, but you're dead. So the church, the diagnosis here is that the church has a reputation. You have a name, but you're dead, right? Like Jesus sees past. Listen to me, right? Listen, right? It's funny. I just had a moment. I was thinking there's this video, this little boy says, listen, Linda. I don't know, I just thought about that, but I don't know. Google that and you'll get a good laugh. But anyway, totally off track. Listen, Jesus sees past public perception. Just because a person, a church, or whoever has the approval of man, has popularity, has followers, has the likes, just because they have all these things, they have the good programs, the good ideas, the good this, the good workshops, the good teachings, just because they have that public perception, just because the Christian community has approved certain people or anybody, that does not mean that God has approved that or approved them. The only person who truly knows the true heart of anybody or any church or any person is God. He's the only one who could judge that. He's the only one who really knows that. Jesus sees past public perception. So the remedy, what's I guess the not now what's the question? What's the remedy when your faith is running on fumes? And that's when we get to this call, this like major call to wake up. Like he says look at verse 2 and 3. He says, wake up, strengthen what he so he I mean he sees their he sees their trajectory. Like they've got this reputation to be alive. Everybody likes them, right? They're well liked, got a bunch of subscribers, probably a bunch of likes, right? Everybody follows them, everybody likes their stuff. But Jesus sees that they're actually dead inside. And he's like, wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. I have found your deeds unfinished in the sight of God. Remember, therefore, you have received what you heard and hold fast and repent. But if you don't wake up, I'll come like a thief. Like that's huge. So he's the call to wake up. He says, strengthen what remains. So there's still something there. Like I think that's the beauty of this. There's still something there. Like God hasn't given up on them. Like so. He takes this opportunity to say, like Jesus is calling them to remember, to hold fast, and he's giving them the opportunity to repent, right? So for us as to like what we do with this is the fact that we need to have spiritual discipline, right? We need to return back to the basics of faith, right? And we need to, in my opinion, we need to really question ourselves, like, are we living on our past deeds? Do we have a name, but truly inside we're truly dead? Like we should investigate that. We should pray about that, right? And so then when we get to the second part of verse 3, he has this warning. Like, so he tells them what they need to do, which is to repent. Right? So he's calling them to fix this, right? To wake up. But then that second part of verse 3 is interesting because he goes back to the warning. He's like, if they don't wake up, he absolutely will come like a thief. And this echoes heavily on Jesus' teaching in Matthew 24, verse 43. Actually, let me pull that up. Matthew 24. I should have had this up, but I did not. 24, verse 43. He says this. But understand this. It says, we're actually studying verse 42. Really, it's the whole section, but verse 32 says, he says, therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you must also be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour where you do not expect. So it echoes that, right? But listen, so we got all these warnings, but even in a dying church, there's still a faithful remnant. Even in a church that may appear well and maybe as a collective church may be dead inside, right? Or maybe dying, right? There's still what he notes there is that there's still a faithful remnant in that church, and there is this faithful few that's in the church there, and I think that's powerful. The fact that even though we have this church who's got obviously an issue, right? But the fact that Jesus can see through all that, and he's like, man, I still know who my faithful people are in the midst of this. So regardless of our church community, right, and where they land, we have an individual responsibility, right, to not soil our garments, right? We have an individual. So there's a collective responsibility as a church, but there's an individual responsibility to remain faithful. And that's what he notes, of the fact that there is still, even though the collective church is an issue, there is a faithful remnant there. They haven't soiled their garments. So there's this promise of walking with Jesus in white. So the encouragement is that faithfulness, listen, faithfulness is never overlooked by God. So regardless of what camp you're in, or where you go to church, or what you do, right? Like, we have an individual responsibility to remain faithful, to not soil our garments before God, right? Because that's not overlooked by God when we stay the course, right? Now, as we start to end this section on Sardis, right? What we notice is that there's this final promise, right? And it's a beautiful, beautiful promise here. And he says this in verses 5 and 6. He says, "The one who is victorious will, like them, be dressed," right? Talking about the this faithful remnant, "dressed in white, for they are worthy. The one who is victorious will, like them, be dressed in white. I will never blot out the name of that person from the book of life." It's amazing. "But I will acknowledge that name before my Father and his angels. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit of the says to the church." He says, whoever has ears. So if you got ears, you got to hear. So the overcomers are going to be clothed in white. Their names will not be blotted out from the book of life, according to Jesus. Jesus will then therefore acknowledge them before the Father. Listen, if you feel personally like Sardis, if you're in a circumstance where maybe if your church may feel like you're Sardis, right? Like you're just going through the motions, know that God's not finished with you. His call today is simple. Wake up, strengthen what remains, hold fast, repent, walk with him in purity, and walk with him in purpose. Listen, let's not be Christians in name only. Let's be alive in the spirit. Like, listen, let's commit to this, right? And we have the opportunity to wake up. We have the opportunity to repent. We have the opportunity to change course according to what we're seeing as artists, right? So let's not, like I said, let's not just be Christians in name only, right? Let's stay the course with Christ. Ask God, to search our hearts, right? And let's encourage one another in this journey. And listen, if you know of anybody who needs this, share this with them. Share this out so we can get this out to as many people as possible, so that they can be encouraged as well to turn and stay the course, right? And just understand the promises of God. So join us here again next week as we continue the series on Revelation, as we unpack the letters to 7 churches. And don't forget to like, to share, and if this challenged or encouraged you, right? And let's engage in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this. And until the next one, have a good one, guys.